Welcome to the County Manager's Report. I'm Lloyd Higuera, and with me is Douglas County Manager Larry Werner. And welcome, Larry.
Thank you, Lloyd.
And we're going to be talking about the Douglas County Commission meeting of September 1st. They jump-started September for us by the very first day of September. And at that meeting, it was a pretty busy meeting. Commissioners did adopt a resolution authorizing the Assistant County Manager and Chief Financial Officer to arrange the sale of highway revenue bonds for the purpose of street and highway construction in the amount of $13 million. And I was wondering, what projects will that bond money be used for?
All right. Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, the revenue bonds are based on the gas tax, so I thought I'd throw that in there too.
That's important. That's how you're going to pay them back.
Exactly. The roadways that are being proposed are the Jackson Valley Road from Alpine View to Genoa Lane. There's going to be a reconstruction of the base and road bed modifications and new pavement. Centerville Lane will be from Foothill to SR 88. And again, it'll be a reconstruction of the base and some roadway modifications and total new paving. And Waterloo Lane from SR 756 to SR 88, that'll be a full reconstruction within the existing right-of-way. Dresselview Road from Riverview Drive to SR 756. It'll be, as the others, it'll be reconstruction and new pavement. And then Johnson Lane from US 395 to East Valley. It's to remove and reconstruct the pavement, reconstruct the base in some areas, and improve drainage.
Wow, so that's a big load of road work, that's for sure.
Right, we're going to have a lot of the county messed up next year when we start constructing these.
And then is there an estimate on how much money the gas tax, the raise in the gas tax will generate in a year's time, say?
Oh, Lloyd, I meant to have that number, and I don't. I do know. I don't know the exact number, but it in itself is sufficient to cover the bonds that we're proposing. And that pretty much takes care of it. What that will do is free up some of the other monies that we were getting from the other portion of the gas tax. I should specify this is from the extra nickel that got approved. And the other previous 4 cents will be used to do the routine maintenance work and buy some needed construction equipment, maintenance equipment. So this money will free up those dollars to allow us to do those. So it kind of has a mushroom effect.
Well, it's nice, I mean, nobody likes taxes being increased, but when you can see the results right away that your roads are being improved, has to make you feel somewhat good about it.
Yeah, I would hope so, yes. I mean, that's what it was intended for, and that's actually what we're going to put to use doing. So there shouldn't be any questions about having it disappear into the general coffers.
Okay, very good. Also related to that, commissioners approved a contract with Sherman and Howard to act as bond counsel for the proposed highway revenue bonds. And what is the function of a bond counsel?
The function of bond counsel is basically ultimately to issue an opinion that the process, the bonds, the methods of repayment, the types of construction are all within the law, and that the projects have enough resource, or the bond has enough resource to be paid for. And it's basically to hand a potential investor to look at and feel assured that if they do invest in the bonds, then they are going to get repaid, and that the bonds are going to be used for what they're intended to be used for, and that it is through a full legal process.
I see. Okay. So that's the legal part of the whole thing.
That's the legal part, yeah. And that's a big part.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. Also, at the September 1st meeting, commissioners did approve a new policies and procedures manual for the Carson Valley Adult Daycare Program. So it sounds like that program is getting closer to fruition.
It is. This is part of the licensure requirement from the state. There has to be a full set of policies and procedures on how they deal with everything that occurs within the adult day club, from feeding to sanitation to the facility. So it outlines, as you may have recollected, I think there's about 30 or 40 pages of policies and procedures outlining how the county will act in taking care of the adults in this adult day club.
Okay, more paperwork.
A lot of paperwork.
Commissioners also approved an agreement between Douglas County Social Services and the East Fork Fire District. This is for medical billing and collections for the adult daycare program. So that's one more bit of proof that it's getting closer.
It's getting closer, right. And this agreement, I don't know if folks have ever been involved with trying to bill for Medicaid and those sorts of things, but it's a very complicated process. East Fork has been doing it because of the ambulance and the medical side of things, And it seemed to make sense to use their expertise and their knowledge in doing this rather than trying to staff up on our own, even though we will be ultimately paying for one more position over at East Fork. It seemed to make sense. The other thing we'd have to do is acquire our own software programs, our own billing programs, get our own approvals through the insurance companies, that sort of thing, and that just didn't seem to make a lot of sense where we can use East Fork to do that for us.
Okay, very good. Commissioners introduced an ordinance amending the sewer facilities and non-residential wastewater discharge ordinance, and what changes were made there?
What's being proposed is that we have situations, particularly in commercial buildings, where they're served by our water system or somebody's water system, and they shut the building down or they decide not to use it at all, and they'll disconnect the water. Under our current code, the sewer bill stays the same regardless of whether you're using water or not, and it didn't seem to make a lot of sense. So what we are looking at is that when a building such as we've described shuts down, then there's a modification to the sewer bill to only pay that portion that pays for the fixed cost, the pipe and that sort of thing that has been installed in that. But the actual cost relating to treating the sewage will be eliminated from the cost.
I see.
Or from the bill, I should say.
Okay. More sewer motions here. Commissioners directed Public Works to establish a commercial sewer fixed operations base rate for the county sewer utility.
Right. This is the parallel item with the previous one we just talked about. To change a rate in Douglas County, we do it under the authority allowed under NRS 318, and you have to go through a series of steps. You introduce an ordinance, and then you actually hold a rate hearing to discuss that, and then at the end of the day, you can then, on the second or the adoption of the second reading, then you can incorporate that new rate within that ordinance. But those two are tied together.
I see. Okay. Commissioners also conducted the annual performance evaluation for East Fork Fire Chief Todd Carlini, and he usually gets high marks on his evaluations.
He did. He does, and he did. This is probably the last time that the board will be doing Chief Carlini's performance evaluation, because starting next year he'll be with a new board. He's on a separate board, but this is a pretty standard process. It's an annual evaluation, just as anybody goes through on performance evaluation. But the chief did receive high marks, and I think he's pretty well respected in the community, and that kind of reflected that.
Sure. Well, he does a great job. Commissioners gave their approval to increase the staff at the East Fork Fire Protection District by one full-time billing specialist. This kind of goes back to the adult daycare, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what we talked about. Same thing.
Yeah. Okay. And then also on September 1st, commissioners held their first public hearing on the 2017 community block grants and discussed some money that was available from the 2016 grants.
Yeah, this was an interesting item. We learned a lesson in our agenda preparation is maybe not to combine two things into one item, although they were both related. But the first part of that was that there was additional money that came to the county from the state, from the Community Development Block Grant Program, where funds had not been expended in other areas. And so it allowed the county then to go back to its priority list of the programs that weren't funded and see if they now should be funded. And that's what the item was before us, to hold a hearing on which of the two or both or a portion of it might receive funding from the 2016 Community Development Block Grant. There will be a subsequent item on the next agenda that talks about which one they're going to pick on a priority. So,
I see.
And then the other part was to start the 2017 Community Development Block Grant Program, to begin the advertising for getting proposals, to start developing a committee that would review those and then make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners later this year on the 2017 Community Development Block Grant Program.
Okay, very good. And commissioners accepted a grant from FEMA for the installation of additional culverts on State Route 88 between the East Fork of the Carson River and the Cottonwood Slough. Right,
and this is a program being done in conjunction with the Nevada Department of Transportation. It's a fairly significant project, and as we get grant monies to do, starting with the design process and then going through that, and I think this money from will go back to NDOT to help them fund the design of the culverts, and then ultimately we'll try to get grants for the construction. So it's a multi-phased process.
Okay. Do you know how much money is coming in that grant? I mean, or is it a flexible?
Yeah, it was a specific amount, and I apologize. I don't,
Well, that's
I
okay.
don't remember
just,
the number.
I was just curious how much it was. Commissioners also approved the abandonment of a 50-foot emergency public access easement that was located in the Genoa Heights subdivision.
That also was a very interesting conversation and discussion over this. There's a couple of developments in Genoa, and one of them is adjacent to, well, they're adjacent to each other. And over the years, people had been using from one development through the development under consideration an easement for just kind of daily activity. Actually, it was used for a shortcut to get it past a certain portion of town. People used it on horses and stuff, but it was an easement on an individual owner's property.
Wow.
And originally it had been set aside for emergency access. And the problem becomes is how do you control that, and the concept of putting up gates or doing other things. And finally the board made the decision that it's really not the county's role. The necessity for that emergency access easement had gone away. They're no longer required under certain circumstances because mainly of the ability for East Fork to get in and fight fires and do that sort of thing. This was determined no longer necessary. So the board ultimately said, no, okay, we'll abandon our interest in the easement, and then if the neighbors want to work with the property owner to work out something for either pedestrian or horse access or whatever, they can work out amongst themselves.
Okay.
But the county's out of the picture.
Very good. Commissioners also heard several presentations during that meeting, including the annual progress report on the Carson River Watershed Regional Floodplain Management Plan.
Right, and this one is a program that's been ongoing for quite some time to look at the Carson River itself, and when it floods, what are things that can be done to reduce the impact of the flooding, what should be done parallel to the river to make sure it stays as a viable river. So it's kind of a progress report on taking it from the headwaters in Alpine County down through Churchill or Lyon County and Carson City. And I think each one of the entities has adopted or is in the process of adopting the management plan, and that, like I say, specifically addresses the activities of flooding along the Carson River.
I see.
So basically, there's a progress report on that.
Okay. There was also a presentation by the Carson River Subconservancy District.
That one was interesting. Ed James from the Carson River Subconservancy District had talked to me a couple of weeks ago about what he's been looking at, the data from rainfall, the drought, that sort of thing. And he basically showed us kind of the change in rainfall that's occurred over the last few years, how this last year has been much better than previous years, but barely makes normal, and how that impacts groundwater, how that impacts other kinds of things. So it was just kind of an update on where we're at with local drought.
I see. Okay. And there was also a presentation on the progress of the Main Street Gardnerville program.
Right. The Main Street Gardnerville program folks came in and gave a presentation to the board about the activities they've had, the improvements that they're looking at, some of the downtown information that's they're providing. So it was a good presentation kind of on what's been going on with the Main Street program.
Okay. And one more presentation on the selected sites for permanent and temporary polling places for early voting. Are they going to be using the commission chambers?
Yes, they'll be using the same areas
Darn.
again, I think, just as they did in the past. I know they were looking at some changes, but in talking to Clerk Treasurer Kathy Lewis, she felt that this year was probably not the appropriate time to start making changes, but they're looking at doing some different things in the future. There's issues on voting machines and all kinds of stuff that's coming up, but it seemed to be not good timing to try to change things right now. So back to the old, staying with the old locations.
Pretty much where they were last time.
Exactly.
Okay. And commissioners approved a memo of understanding on an agreement to give county employees a 1.5% increase to each employee's wage, I'll get it, on their evaluation due date.
That was a confusion in the actual agreement that was approved a couple meetings ago. Through negotiations and previous contracts that we had, is that there was a 1.5% increase that was provided to the employees. The question came as to if somebody was at the top of their range, how would we deal with that? And in those cases, since the top of range, we didn't want to extend the range, so the issue was there to take whatever the difference was between where they would be topped out and how much they would have made and issue to that as a check as a year-end bonus kind of thing.
I see.
Although it will be on their anniversary day. But the idea was that it was almost like a cost of living increase, but it really kind of wasn't worded that way. But effectively, it's being handled the same.
That pretty well covers the September 1st meeting of the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. Of course, they have another meeting coming up on September 15th. And do you have any preview of that?
I don't. We started this morning on looking through that and trying to get the agenda out, and we had a lot of questions on some of the items. So it's kind of back to the drawing board. We want to make sure that we've got things listed correctly.
So we'll wait to see you on the agenda.
Yes.
Well, Larry, I thank you for all the information you shared here on the County Manager's Report. That's what we do here. Larry Werner, our County Manager. I'm Lloyd Higuera, and we'll see you next time right here on the County Manager's Report.